Hello, my name's Olurotimi Osha. I'm continuing with my discussion on the Holocaust, and I'm going to give the instance of an actual Kapo. I did an earlier video describing a Kapo during the Holocaust. The Kapo was uh, a member of the Jewish community, a Jew who was selected by the Gestapo, the Nazis, to supervise the systematic transportation and extermination of Jewish people during the Holocaust. And these couples, of course, after so they were trapped between a rock and a hard place, right? So they had no option. They were doing it under duress. Nevertheless, they were brutal to Jewish people, to their members of their own people, even though they did it under duress. And they did it, sometimes to be able to get benefits during the terrible Holocaust, during the extermination and the persecution of Jews during the Nazi era in Germany between 1933 and 1945. I did an earlier video extensively describing the capos, how they were selected, and I've been doing videos discussing what the Holocaust uh, was. I'm not going to focus on that now. I wanted to focus on a particular case, right? That's the case of Hirsch. His name was Heinrich Hirsch Barenblat. He was a he was a capo. He had been the chief of the Jewish police in Bendzin in Poland. Bendzin, that was a ghetto in Poland. So there are these European ghettos where they herded Jewish people, of course, during the Nazi era. And the role of the role of uh, Barenblat as chief of police was to make sure Jews who were selected for extermination by the Nazis were did not escape or did not join did not secretly join the group that had been selected to live. And so this is the dilemma that this particular man, Hirsch Barenblat, faced. So Hirsch Barenblat was Jewish, and I've talked about how after the end of the Nazi era, the state of Israel established a law prosecuting, that's a law to prosecute Nazis and Nazi collaborators, right, to punish Nazis and their Nazi collaborators. It was under this law that Adolf Eichmann, one of the chief architects of the transportation of Jews for the extermination, and in Auschwitz, uh, this was the same law that was used to try and execute him, right, in the 1960s. I've done an earlier video discussing this. Now I want to focus on the trial of Hirsch Barenblat, who was a Jewish man, and he'd been chief of the Jewish police in Bendzin in Poland. And after the war, somehow in 1958, he managed to, get into Israel. And he was a Jewish man, and he had been living as a Jewish man in Israel, in the state of Israel, from 1958. He was a conductor, he was a musician and a conductor in the Israeli National Opera. And, there was no fanfare, there was no attention, he'd drawn no attention until one day, while he was having a performance at a kibbutz, right, at a kibbutz, right, and he as he was playing the piano and doing his performance, someone recognized him. Someone from the audience screamed out that, Barenblat, I recognize you, Nazi murderer. Screamed out that he was a Nazi, he was a capo. I've described what a capo is in an earlier video. A capo was viewed as a traitor. It's the worst. They say it's the worst term that a Jew can call another Jewish person. So he was called a capo, screamed from the audience, I was this person. So he was a survivor who recognized um, Baron Blatz, his role in herding off Jewish people for extermination in the concentration camps in Auschwitz. So this was in 1960. So after that, there was an investigation. The police in the state of Israel investigated, and they arrested him in 1961, and he faced trial. And sometime in February 1964, he was convicted. He was convicted um, in 1964. The prosecutor was David Libai, and for the defense, his defense attorney, that's Hirsch Barenblat's defense attorney, was uh, Ari Rosenblum. Ari Rosenblum, in his defense, said that look, this person had been acquitted of um, being a collaborator in an organization that was hostile to Jews, right? So eventually, the Jewish state deemed the uh, the Jewish Council of Elders. That's what they were called. They were also called Judenrat. So they were established by the Nazis. So they selected these people. So sort of like a divide and rule, right? So they used Jewish people to monitor, supervise, chaperone their Jewish communities uh, for the implementation of the extermination of the Jews, right, and their dehumanization as well. So these laws that were punishing Nazis and Nazi collaborators wanted to deem the Council of Jewish Elders that were established by the Nazis, right, to supervise the transportation and extermination of the Jews, but which was made up of Jewish people themselves, the Jewish police. So they were trying to view them as an organization hostile to Jews. But Barenblat was acquitted by a Polish court that he wasn't a collaborator, so he was acquitted earlier. And so his defense attorney, Ari Rosenblum, was arguing that the Jewish Council of Elders uh, was not hostile towards the Jews, right? They had no hostility towards Jewish people, but they served the interests of Jewish people in the worst of possible circumstances, right? In the worst of circumstances. So this was the defense attorney, this was his argument. Now, on the other side, the prosecutor, David Libai, he was a prosecutor at the time, he did acknowledge that this guy, Barenblat, had actually saved the lives of about 20 Jewish people, 15 to 20 Jewish people, right? While he served as commander of the Jewish police, whose job it was to, to make sure that those select Jews that had been selected for extermination did not escape and they did not join the group that had been selected to live, but to make sure that they were transported for extermination, right? So that leading them like lambs to the slaughter. That's why in my earlier video, I did a video explaining the Judas goats, right? What a Judas goat is, how they lead lambs to the slaughter, right? And this was an expression that was actually used, that they were led to the slaughter, right? That Barenblat and the Jewish Council of Elders, the Jewish police, were leading Jews to the slaughter, right? So the prosecutor, David Libai, he acknowledged, like I said, that Barenblat actually saved the lives of about 15 to 20 Jews that had been selected for death. And he said that, okay, that it was up to the triers of fact to determine if Barenblat, as a member of the Jewish police, right, if he was entitled to save his own life by carrying out the orders, by executing the duties of the Jewish police. That was the question. The district court in Tel Aviv found him guilty, right? So they convicted him and he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. But it was appealed, right? So on appeal, it went all the way to the Israeli Supreme Court. The Israeli Supreme Court would eventually acquit him, though. They would reverse the conviction. And so Barenblat only served about 3 months of his conviction, of his 5-year sentence. He served just 3 months of his 5 year sentence until the Israeli Supreme Court, the case went to appeal to the all the way up to the Israeli Supreme Court, which reversed the conviction and said there was insufficient evidence that he was hostile to the Jews, and they said he had a choiceless choice. That was one of the expressions that was used by the Israeli Supreme Court, that he was burdened. He had a choiceless choice. He was under duress, and so he was acquitted. His conviction was reversed, and he was acquitted. Eventually, in any event, Barenblat, I think, would move and live out the rest of his life as a musician, as an opera conductor in Germany. He would leave Israel because obviously, once he'd been labeled as a Kapo, I guess he was persona non grata in Israel, and so he moved to Germany. So that was the sad case of a Kapo. He was fortunate because others would be who were prosecuted were sentenced to life imprisonment immediately after uh, the era of the Nazis in April 1945. The prisoners who immediately, when they were released, right, once they were liberated, one of the first things they did was they would lynch the capos, right? They identified the capos amongst them and they lynched them. So for those who survived, for those who escaped, like Barenblat, who went through trial, and Barenblat was one of the lucky ones that even though he was convicted, the Israeli Supreme Court would acquit him, and the expression was he had a choiceless choice. Um, Now, I'm going to stop this video here, but in case you're interested in reading more about the Holocaust and the efforts of the Mossad after the Holocaust to actually capture Nazis and Nazi collaborators and bring them to trial, you might want to, I'm going to just cite a few some films, right? In this era of films, it's America, like Hollywood is our thing. There's some films that you can watch. Um, the House on Garibaldi Street is a good one, and that's the House of Garibaldi Street. It's about how Adolf Eichmann was captured, and the capture of Adolf Eichmann. And then there's also the movie Operation Finale, right, which is like a remaking, more modern retelling of the House on Garibaldi Street. It stars Ben Kingsley. I've seen that as well. Pretty good. And there's the movie 1960 movie Kapo, right? It's not in English, but it's subtitled. You can watch it. That's good. Kapo. Um, Now, in case you want to also learn more about the Holocaust, so I was fortunate even before I became a Holocaust study fellow at Columbia University's Institute for Israel and Jewish Studies in 2020. Before that, I had actually, I was well versed in the Holocaust because my library at home was stocked with biographies of Adolf Hitler. Now, if you have biographies of Adolf Hitler, they're not glorifying Adolf Hitler, but they are authoritative and works of history, just detailing his rise and the atrocities of the Nazi Party. So one that I had was William Hirsch, I think William L. Shirer's the rise. So William L. Shirer's The Rise and Fall of Adolf Hitler. We also and is it Ira Keshin's? There was one called Hitler. I think it's Ira Keshin. I can't remember his name. Then there's Robert Payne. I remember very well. Robert Payne, Life and Death of Adolf Hitler. So I'd read those books when I was a kid. So you get details of the atrocities of the Nazis and what they did to Jewish people, right? The Holocaust, how they were carted off, and the atrocities, the Nuremberg laws that basically legalized dehumanization of Jewish people, right? So uh, when you know these things, you can understand the red flags in our society in America or anywhere in the world that you're seeing it. So to make sure that it never happens again, right? And we're seeing semblances of these things in Montgomery County, Maryland, right? Um, I have videos discussing the atrocities of Judge James Bonifant and his collaborator, Judge Michael Olive, Judge B.B. Berry, and Montgomery County Police that operates with the brio of the Gestapo, the Nazi police. I was assaulted, framed in my home, and Montgomery County, Maryland, is it's a neo-Nazi environment. So we can't say it enough. This is what I've experienced. We're Nigerian Americans, Africans, new Africans, first generation Africans. We are being led like lamb to the slaughter, and we have to be very careful. We can't raise the alarm enough. Notice the red flags. So, in any event, read literature on the Holocaust, understand the red flags, and understand how people who look like you, members of your community, they become gatekeepers to that they can be used by the oppressor group to persecute you. They're inside threats, and they're used as traitors to squill on you and to persecute you. I've talked about how Howard University professor Jide Wariri was used like a Judas, like a traitor. He's someone my father paid for his wedding. My dad helped sponsored him to come to America, and this man was used like a traitor. He was suborned to commit perjury on an emergency evaluation petition, and that's what they're using. They're using these psychiatric hospitals now, just like the Nazis did. Nazis used eugenics, right? Racist medicine, used Jewish people as guinea pigs, and this is what they're now trying to do in Montgomery County, Maryland. In Maryland, they have racist psychologists like Dr. Uh, Julie Smith, and they're committing fabrications. They're Nazi police officers, Montgomery County Police. They're fabricating charges against Nigerian Americans and immigrants, African immigrants. They're cutting them off. They have a crooked judge who finds them incompetent to stand trial. They coerce them under duress, send them to psychiatric hospitals after they've filed false charges against them. They they appropriate their property. My property was stolen in my home. My cash, my debit card, they even withdrew cash from my bank account. They stole my certificate of naturalization, right? And they conjured up this man saying he's my uncle. When my family's in Nigeria, nobody knew where I was. I'd been kidnapped under color of law. So they're using the efficiency, the systematic efficiency that the Nazis used in the 1930s, 1940s. That's what's going on in Montgomery County, Maryland. And they have judges, crooked judges. They're trying to extort money from Nigerian immigrants, wealthy Nigerian communities. That's what they're doing now. They're Nazis, new Nazis of the 21st century in Montgomery County, Maryland. In any event, my name is Olurotimi Osha. I'll do more videos explaining the Holocaust. I'll keep you posted. Thank you.